Hi, I'm Jon Cartwright and I like the Wii. The Wii catches a lot of flack because it tried to appeal to a new audience and therefore expanded the range of games and made the entire industry better for everyone. This is one of my favourite consoles of all time, and it all comes down to the Wii Remote. And yes, I get it, you don't want to play your games, like this! But the best Wii games barely use waggle at all. In fact, the best feature of the Wii is the sensor bar for pointing. This enhanced so many normal games like Resident Evil 4, and Metroid Prime, and Zelda. Motion aiming is still used in games today like Breath of the Wild and Splatoon. It was so good that we couldn't lose it because of the Wii. So, without further ado, here are the 21 best Wii games. But there's a catch. This isn't really our list, this is more your list. This is voted for by the Nintendo Life readers, and is actually an ongoing list, so if you're not happy with the results of this top 21, you can change that by going to nintendolife.com, making an account, and voting for Excitebots. Come on, Excitebots. And also, up until the top 5, I'll be presenting these in a random order. This is more of a list to honour the Wii rather than make all the games fight together for the very best title. So anyway, here are the 21 best Wii games as ranked by you. Tatsunoko vs Capcom Ultimate All-Stars. The Wii didn't get an original Street Fighter game, and so Tatsunoko vs Capcom is basically the Wii's Capcom Fighter. Now, at the time, I didn't know what a Tatsunoko was, but honestly, I didn't care. Though for reference, they're a Japanese anime studio. The reason I didn't care if I knew them though, was because the game itself stood on its own. To this day, Tatsunoko vs Capcom is one of my favourite Capcom crossover fighters. It's a bit more simplified than Marvel vs Capcom, and because of that, the gameplay feels so unique. We've got Capcom fighters like Morrigan, Mega Man Volnut, Beautiful Joe, Chun-Li, Ryu, Alex, Frank West, Roll, and even more. Not to mention, this was a Wii game with online play, and that was a pretty rare occurrence, especially in a fighting game. Tatsunoko vs Capcom filled a great gap on the Wii, and I'm so happy it made it onto the list. Skyward Sword is a divisive game. It received great reviews at the time, but many Zelda fans criticized it for being too linear. However, in a post-Breath of the Wild world where we have the most open Zelda game, I think the expectations of Skyward Sword are now wildly different, and people can appreciate it for what it is rather than what it isn't. Yes, this is a rather linear game. There's only one town, and the areas are basically dungeons in themselves. And I think that's fine now. It's great that so many Zelda games offer different experiences and ways to play, and Skyward Sword is definitely a unique one. This game completely revolves around Wii Motion Plus, and because of that, it's kind of hard to take it off the Wii. This is the perfect platform for it. The sword combat feels amazing, a lot of the items like the beetle are some of the best in the entire series, and while I could do without some instances, like flying in the sky by moving the Wii Remote, motion's just so deeply tied into the DNA of this game. And this art style is utterly beautiful, the colours are just so vibrant and cozy. Skyloft is easily the coziest Zelda town. The characters too, this version of Zelda is absolutely brilliant, and I love Groose. Please put Groose in Smash! I could do without fighting the Empress 4 times, and there's certainly instances of padding, but when Skyward Sword shines, it's such a good game. Oh heck yeah, it's Beat the Beat Rhythm Paradise, otherwise known as Rhythm Heaven Fever. This is one of my favourite games of all time. The series is very simple, you basically just press a button in beat with a rhythm. That's basically the entire game. But the zany humour, the vibes, the music, they all make this such a wonderful experience. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten through most of the song until just the very end where I miss one thing and I restart all over again. Not out of frustration, but because I choose to. For a game about rhythm, there are no motion controls in Rhythm Heaven Fever. You don't shake the remote to a beat, you don't dance, all you do is press the A and B button. There's really nothing more to it. What this means though is latency isn't really a thing. As soon as you press that button, the beat goes through, so this is a really responsive game. Fever are some of my favourite games in the entire series, and I love this art style so much. It's a shame this is the only console game, because otherwise the series exists only on handhelds. Seeing this on the big screen with proper speakers really does a lot of justification for not only the art style, but the audio design too. Megamix on 3DS compiles a lot of games from Fever, but I think there's still a lot of value on its own. What I'm trying to say is it doesn't matter what entry you play, just play Rhythm Paradise, it's such a fun series. And this is without a doubt one of the best ones. In 2008, it was weird to go around someone's house and not see a Wii and a copy of Mario Kart Wii. This game was a phenomenon, selling 37.38 million units. I played this at so many parties, and while it's definitely the least balanced Mario Kart, I think that kind of adds to the fun. For basic play, your skill level doesn't really matter that much. You can be in 12th place, get a bullet bill, and all of a sudden, be in 1st place. There's a lot of stuff that could be called BS, which stands for bad shenanigans, but when you're playing with a bunch of friends, it's hard not to just laugh. I also played this a lot online, and I mean a lot. This, Brawl, and Halo 3 were my go-to online games at the time, and so I have a lot of really fond memories of this one. There's also a really dedicated community that's still going for Mario Kart Wii. Speedruns of this game are absolutely insane. Mario Kart Wii is like the Melee of Mario Kart. It had a great roster, a great track selection, it was a great party game, and it's also surprisingly in-depth. It may not be everyone's favourite, but Mario Kart Wii has a special place in my heart at least. You may know Vanillaware nowadays as the developers of Dragon's Crown and 13 Sentinels, but back in 2009, they gave us Muramasa the Demon Blade. This is one of the most beautiful games on the entire system, and the combat is just so fluid. This 2D art style hasn't aged a day, and while it was given new life on the PlayStation Vita, the Wii version is still a great way to experience this on the big screen. And also, the disc called the Wii U. That's definitely a U. Don't tell me that's not a U. This game came from the future. We've had more games like this from indie studios as of late, but at the time, there was very little like Muramasa. This felt like a lost genre, so it was great that it returned with such a quality entry. Now here's an interesting one, New Play Control's Pikmin 2. While this is without a doubt seen more as a GameCube game, I can definitely attest how the Wii controls bolster this game. The Wii Remote's always been strongest as a pointer, and just moving the cursor anywhere on the screen with the flexibility of the Wii Remote is almost immeasurably better than the GameCube controller. If you're gonna play Pikmin 1 or 2, I definitely recommend the Wii version. So interestingly, our audience chose Pikmin 2, which is definitely a very strong game. I tend to personally lean towards the first Pikmin. I find the consequences of the countdown add a much more desperate vibe to the game, making it more of a survival, which Pikmin 2 definitely is too, but I don't get quite the same vibe. Either way though, both games are absolutely tremendous. Although despite having less urgency, I'd say Pikmin 2 is the more challenging of the two. They're kind of two parts of one greater whole, so if you've played Pikmin 3 Deluxe recently, definitely go back and play the first two games as well. There's a brilliant multiplayer mode too that definitely still holds up. And just like in other Pikmin games, there's a bunch of branded products too, so you'll find things like a Duracell battery. It's definitely an interesting pick for this list, but I can't debate that Pikmin, despite being a GameCube game, is best played on the Wii. Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn is an expensive game. This is the sequel to the GameCube's Path of Radiance, and for the longest time, this was the last Fire Emblem on a console, though I guess Three Houses has kinda broken that streak now. You play with the Wii Remote on its side like an NES game, and for the most part, it's standard Fire Emblem affair. So Radiant Dawn didn't really utilize the unique aspects of the Wii, but it also didn't need to. This is pretty much a GameCube game on the Wii, and that's absolutely fine. This is the second game featuring Ike as well, so if you wanted to learn a bit more about him from Smash Bros, this is a very good place to do so. Graphically, I find this game's a bit easier to return to than the 3DS games. I much prefer this art style, and the music is absolutely amazing. It unfortunately didn't launch in the series Prime, and because of that, not that many people have played it, and it didn't sell very well. Still, this is a quality Fire Emblem that every fan should play. The Last Story was part of Project Rainfall, an attempt to localize 3 Wii games, The Last Story, Xenoblade Chronicles, and Pandora's Tower. It was a big deal back then when these 3 games finally got localized, and this one in particular is rather special. It comes from Sakaguchi, the creator of Final Fantasy. The Wii certainly had a few RPGs, but very few had the caliber and legacy behind it of The Last Story. I really hope we see this game again someday. It may not have the reception and critical acclaim of Xenoblade Chronicles, but this is still an amazing RPG that every Wii fan should play. Now who's ready for a very sad story? There was a game that compiled Kirby's Dream Land, Kirby's Dream Land 2, Kirby's Adventure, Kirby's Dream Land 3, Kirby Superstar, and Kirby 64 The Crystal Shards. But this game never left America. That's right, Kirby's Dream Collection made the list despite being exclusive to America and Japan. And you know what? I can't blame you guys for voting for this. What an amazing collection. While Nintendo was giving Mario a Super Nintendo ROM on a disc, for Kirby they gave us something so much more special. Yeah, you could get some of these on Virtual Console, but games like Dreamland and Dreamland 2 were only on the Game Boy, which the Wii couldn't play. Not only that, but the collection itself was so well presented. Seriously, this puts All-Stars to shame, and there's even brand new challenge levels based on Kirby's Adventure Wii. This is how you do an anniversary collection. It's still a shining example today. Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. For many years, this was the gold standard of doing a first-person game on the Wii. The controls felt absolutely perfect. It was like a keyboard and mouse, only you can sit back and relax with it. They really make the most out of motion in this game, and because of that, this is the most action-heavy game in the entire trilogy. Despite spanning across multiple planets too, it's also the most linear, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Metroid Prime 3 felt like the Wii's blockbuster journey. It's so big and bold, and there's even voice acting, which the first two games barely had. I don't think it quite has the impact of Metroid Prime 1, but it's definitely my second favourite game in the Prime series. Though to be fair, Prime 2 is also very good. In 2007, Samus felt like a frontrunner of Nintendo. She had 3 core games in the Prime series, a spin-off, and came out in the same year as games like Mario Galaxy. Unfortunately, that legacy wouldn't quite last, but Retro Studios went out with a bang, and soon, that bang's gonna be reignited. Wii Sports Resort came out 3 years after the first game and utilised Wii Motion Plus. If the first game was the showcase of the Wii, the sequel was the showcase of Wii Motion Plus. The entire game takes place on Woohoo Island, a resort that Nintendo tried to revisit many times. This is in Wii Fit, Mario Kart 7, Pilot Wings Resort, and so on. Understandably though, because Woohoo Island is such a relaxing place. The original Wii Sports is in my opinion one of the most intuitive games of all time, but that doesn't mean it's very complex. In adverts, you'll see people lunging with their hands, whereas in reality, all you have to do is just kind of flick your wrist to hit a tennis ball. It wasn't too hard to figure out how to throw a bowling ball, or how hard to hit a golf ball. The simple technology certainly worked, but Wii Sports Resort turned things up a notch. Bowling and golf returned, and while they may look the same, they're fundamentally very different. And while the original game had 5 sports, Wii Sports Resort has 12. Though I felt all the sports in the first game were really well made, and I'm not sure that's entirely true in the sequel, but you can choose what to play yourself. It was mind-blowing to me playing swordplay for the first time and seeing the Wii Remote mirror my movements one-to-one. Every single twitch was perfectly mirrored in the game. It was insane. There's also a ton of value with challenges, sub-modes, and of course, the multiplayer. Wii Sports and Wii Sports Resort are simply some of the best multiplayer games ever made. This was probably the most hyped I've ever been for a game, Super Smash Bros. Brawl. I checked the Smash Dojo every single day, and I remember going into school one morning, going to the library, using a school computer and checking the dojo, and Sonic was coming to Brawl, and I just had this giant smile on my face the entire time. Brawl was such a big deal. Not only did it revive Pit and give us Pokemon Trainer and Solid Snake and so many other characters, but it had a full-on single-player mode and brought Smash online for the very first time. Now, the consistency of that online mode is up for debate, but the fact it did it in the first place is still so commendable. Brawl felt like a true event, and I was counting down every single day until its release. In fact, I imported this game because it came out much later in Europe, and I just couldn't wait for it. Smash has certainly gotten bigger and more refined, but I don't think it's ever been as exciting as Brawl was. At the time, this was just the biggest video game event, a true celebration of the entire industry, even branching outside of Nintendo for the very first time, and it was just packed full of modes and content. Now, the actual gameplay of Brawl is pretty divisive, but personally, I still think it's a lot of fun. Yeah, it's quite a bit floatier, and of course, sometimes you randomly trip. But I think there's still a lot of value in each entry feeling distinct, and to be fair to Brawl, it's one of the most distinct in the entire series. This means in 2020, Brawl and Ultimate are very different feeling games. They can coexist just fine, and some things Brawl does better, some things Ultimate does better. No matter your view on the gameplay itself, I don't think there's any denying that Brawl's legacy was such a substantial thing on the Wii. The system would not be what it was without it. Kirby went 10 years without a traditional console side-scroller, and when it came along, it was epic yarn. And while the game was really cozy, it wasn't quite the Kirby game that I expected. But the following year, a very traditional Kirby game came to the Wii in the form of Kirby's Adventure Wii, otherwise known as Kirby's Return to Dreamland. This game kinda set the groundwork for Triple Deluxe and Robobot and even Star Allies. They all shared a very similar tone and design philosophy, but what made this one special was the multiplayer. You could play as Kirby, Meta Knight, King Dedede, or Bandana Waddle Dee with your friends. Not only that, but Kirby is hungrier than ever. I mean, look at this guy. Kirby, slow down! By shaking the Wii Remote while inhaling some of the bigger enemies, you'd get these giant special abilities. It may have taken a long time for Kirby to return to console, but this was worth the wait. Despite not being a Zelda game, Okami is very often seen as one of the best Zelda games. This beautiful game set in Japan may have started on the PlayStation 2, but it feels really good on the Wii. On other consoles you can draw using analog sticks, which feels a bit clunky, whereas on the Wii you can just point and sway the cursor around. It feels really natural. At the time, this was very comparable to Twilight Princess, I guess because they both had wolves, but I think despite the Zelda comparisons, these are still very different games. Okami is such an enchanting journey, and it's available on pretty much every console. I'd personally now call the Switch version the definitive version with its HD rumble and touchscreen support, but the Wii version is a real contender. No matter where you play it, Okami is one of the very best games ever made. Nintendo revived a lot of 2D platformers for the very first time on console in over a decade. We had New Super Mario Bros. Wii, Kirby's Return to Dreamland, and, the best of the bunch, the Banana Bunch, Donkey Kong Country Returns. This was handled by the Metroid Prime developers, Retro Studios, and at the time that sounded absurd. How can they possibly make a Donkey Kong game, never mind living up to Rare? Well, not only did they live up, but in many aspects, they surpassed Rare. When putting this against New Super Mario Bros., you can feel the quality shining off the screen. It's not even funny how much more effort was crammed into this. Here's a tiny thing I love. See these frogs that are jumping back and forth? They're not jumping for no reason. If you zoom in, you can see a fly that they're trying to catch, and that's the reason they're jumping. Now, why am I talking about that? Because everything in this game is contextualized. Every platform is stitched into the environment. Everything makes sense. This is a living, breathing world, and while it's still believable, it doesn't let its groundedness get in the way of fun. This is still a wacky and zany adventure, and it's hard to believe it gets even better in the sequel Tropical Freeze, which, in my opinion, may be the best 2D side-scroller ever made, and Returns is built on the same groundwork. This is also available on 3DS, and while it has a few new levels, I'd still say stick with the Wii version. The double frame rate really adds a lot to the game, and I know not everyone likes shaking to roll, but honestly, I never really found it to be a big deal. If anything, it feels pretty good. I got my Wii on Christmas with Wii Sports, Banana Blitz, and Twilight Princess, and I remember sneaking up until like 4 in the morning just playing this game. This was what I got a Wii for. Twilight Princess felt like the biggest Nintendo game ever at that point. The scale and production values were through the roof, and in a time where many people didn't appreciate Wind Waker, this was exactly what they wanted, a more realistic and more mature Zelda game. Now, public perception may have swayed a bit since then, and many people prefer Wind Waker, but Twilight Princess is still a very special game. It's definitely heavily inspired by Ocarina of Time, but it does everything that game did on a much grander scope. The story feels deeper and more emotional, the dungeons are more elaborate, there are 2 hookshots, and it has Midna. Any game with Midna is a good game. Of course, this was intended as a GameCube game and was given Wii controls at kind of the last moment. But much like Breath of the Wild, not that many people experienced it on the original platform. This may as well be a Wii exclusive, and for the most part, it uses motion pretty well. The aiming's spectacular, but attacking just by waggling the Wii remote does get a bit old pretty fast. You also can't directly control the camera like you can on GameCube, so that's kind of missing too. Fortunately, the Wii U version has all the benefits of the GameCube game, with the motion aiming of Wii making that my favourite version to play. But no matter where you play it, Twilight Princess is an essential Zelda game that every single fan should play. Alright, let's get real. Resident Evil 4 is likely my favourite video game. That's it. It's just miraculously paced from beginning to end, and the fundamental gameplay is so good. Everything is built around the limitations of the controls, and because of that, this game hasn't aged a day. Like, yeah, you can't move while aiming, and because of that, the enemies will sort of hobble towards you while they're close, and run from a distance. It may not be as horror-focused, but it still gives you that feeling of overcoming dread. You'll take down swarms of villagers, and cults, and chainsaw men. And while you feel vulnerable, you're also the most powerful thing on screen. Resident Evil 4 is a stone-cold classic, and 13 years later, the Wii version remains my definitive version. The HD versions have issues such as accelerated aiming, which makes your cursor go haywire if you shoot an explosive, and also quick-time events require more from you because of a frame rate bug. The Wii version represents the game in its most polished state, and then some. This is the GameCube build, in widescreen, with all the extras of the PlayStation 2 version, and then the definitive control scheme. Shooting in a game has never been as fun, agile, or accurate as Resident Evil 4 Wii Edition. It is so much fun to aim in this game. You literally just point at the screen and there you go. No matter how many times they release this game, they can never top this control scheme. I'm a weirdo who owns 7 versions of this game, and I always come back to the Wii one. Playing Mercenaries with the Wii Remote and Nunchuck just feels so right. I can do things in this version I can never do on GameCube or Switch or Xbox or PlayStation. It takes something that was already outstanding and improves upon it with just a controller. And by the way, this box art is one of the very best of all time. This one, we don't talk about. Alright, this is going to be divisive. Super Mario Galaxy ranked just above Mario Galaxy 2. People are always so torn on these two games because, at their core, they're both Mario Galaxy, and with gameplay as good as this, you really can't go wrong with either title. But our readers rated Mario Galaxy 1 just below Mario Galaxy 2. This game was simply astonishing to play for the first time. Every single level felt like a roller coaster of emotions, just throwing more and more ideas at you. Putting Mario in space presented endless possibilities, and the platforming was more exciting than it's ever been before. Sure, Mario's a bit more stiff and less agile than Mario 64 and Mario Sunshine, but it completely works in the context of the game. Galaxy still looks stunning today for a Wii game. Replaying this in HD and Mario 3D All-Stars, it could have passed for a brand new Switch game. That, complemented by the amazing orchestral score, just makes this game feel timeless. 20 years from now, Mario Galaxy will still look and play beautifully. The first game was given a slightly more cinematic feel, and I say slightly very lightly because there's barely any cutscenes in this game, but I think the opening kinda sets the tone for the rest of the game to follow. But I can go on and on about this game. There are so many things that make it feel distinct. The power-ups like Bee Mario and the Ghost Mario. The levels like Gusty Garden and Space Junk Galaxy. Everything just comes together to make what was then the best Mario game ever made. And I say then because 3 years later came Mario Galaxy 2. Now, your opinion on this is just going to be personal preference, but to me, Mario Galaxy 2 took the foundation of the first game and somehow made it even better. Mario Galaxy 1 had so many ideas, that game felt complete, but somehow they had so many more ideas that Mario Galaxy 2 feels even more fresh. It's more than just adding Yoshi, although there is something in itself. Almost every level to me just feels more exciting and unique. There's the Cloud power-up where you can make your own platforms by spinning in the air. What an ingenious thing for a 3D platformer. And yeah, Yoshi's here, and Yoshi's pretty much a power-up in himself, right? But then they gave power-ups to the power-up. This game just encapsulates joy. Yes, it's very similar to the first game, and that's okay because the first game is also one of the very best games ever made. There is no such thing as too much Mario Galaxy, and a decade later, people are still asking for a third game. The Wii wasn't exactly known for JRPGs, let alone any RPG, so while other platforms got Ni no Kuni and Final Fantasy XIII and Eternal Sonata and so on, the Wii was left with little but scraps. However, does that really matter when it got the very best RPG of the entire generation, arguably of all time? It was a long journey to get Xenoblade localized, but when it finally came along, the wait was so worth it. This game somehow made the Wii hardware feel giant. It takes place on the bodies of two giant gods, and no matter where you look, you can see yourself contextualized in the world of that body. Sometimes you look to the sky and see far-off places. Contextualized world building in a game has never been this thorough, and so the setting of the Bionis and the Mechonis are two of my favorites in the entirety of this medium. Shulk's adventure is an emotional roller coaster, and the entire party are some of the best to ever be in an RPG. Dunban and Ricky and Melio and Sharla, by the end of the game, these guys feel like family. The game's probably best played now on Switch in the Definitive Edition with upgraded graphics and music, but the core gameplay hasn't changed all that much, so playing it on Wii is still a very solid choice. It was a journey to get this game, and now it has 2 ports and 2 sequels, and Monolith Soft is seen as one of the best assist studios for Nintendo. What a legacy to set for a game that we had to fight to localize. But it was worth it. Xenoblade Chronicles is one of the very best games of all time, and to our readers, the second best Wii game. So what's the first? Metroid Prime Trilogy. Yes, we had Prime 3 earlier, but to this day, Prime Trilogy is the best package in the entirety of gaming. Metroid Prime 1 and Metroid Prime 2 have been enhanced for the Wii with widescreen and the same excellent control scheme from Metroid Prime 3. With Prime 1 in particular being seen as a candidate for the very best game of all time, this is the best way to possibly present it. If you've never played any of these games, do yourself a favor and buy this collection because honestly, you don't need other games for a long time. This isn't just any collection. This is a collection of some of the very best games ever created. You've got Prime 1, the most consistent one, Prime 2, the daring one, and Prime 3, which back then was not an old game but was still included in this collection. Gaming just doesn't get that much better than Metroid Prime Trilogy, and while I'd love for this to be re-released, the magic of the Wii Remote kinda made this more than just a collection. It's what gave these games new life, and taking that away might change things. Prime 1 and Prime 2 were like GoldenEye with their single-stick shooters. They were quite dated in their control schemes. This really does a lot to update them to modern standards. If you could only get one Wii game, this should probably be the one. It's that good. So, what do you guys think about this list? Are you thinking, where's Zack and Wiki? Where's Fragile Dreams? Where's Excitebots? Let us know in the comments below, and also be sure to waggle that subscribe button for even more lovely Nintendo content. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you next time. Bye everyone. Pow pow. It's not loaded.